When my co-author and I started to write this book, we set out to answer three basic questions. First, what is the nature of the COVID crisis that is facing us today? Secondly, how do we land in this state of affair? And thirdly, what do we do next? Three simple questions. Okay? And we have heard about COVID analysis from various speakers. But I think hopefully the perspective I bring to is that we shouldn't look at COVID as a single crisis. It's part of a multiple structural crisis: ecological crisis, political crisis, economic crisis, health crisis, and financial crisis. And how do I tie all of them together? I don't think I've read yet a book that tries to bring them together. Hopefully that's the contribution that we make. Okay? And the third part is, where do we go from here? Is I think, again, in looking at the second question as to what brought about this state of affairs, I turned to the book of Karl Polanyi, the lesser-known Karl, to answer this question. And the book is written in 1947, over 70 years ago, called Origins of Our Time, The Great Transformation, which I find very prescient and in a way trying to resuscitate his thinking, which is basically totally unregulated market forces would lead, as he predicted 70 years ago, to the destruction not only of the economy, of people, but also of the environment. At that time, people don't talk about the environment, but this brilliant economist talked about it. And finally, the third question is, where do we go from here? I find Karl Polanyi deconstructed the concept of the market at three levels, which helped me very understand better the nuances of market. Okay? And he talks about market as an economic, social institution or tool, market economy, and market society. And I think the delineation of these three levels of market, the concept of market, is very helpful to understand, to answer the question, what do we do next? Okay? And I try to answer the questions in terms of three great transformations. The first great transformation, which is basically what we would call the transformation from feudalism to capitalism for Marx and for Polanyi, is the overturning of the relationship between market and society. That's the first great transformation. And I borrowing on him, rhetorically, I talk about the second great transformation, which is the overturning of the relationship between finance and the real economy. And that happened starting in 1970s. And already yesterday, the first panel talked a lot about it. And then the third great transformation is what we would, or at least I personally, and I'm sure many of us share this, to see happen, the transformation where instead of having profit at the apex of this pyramid, we will put it down at the bottom. We have to put the planet and the people above profit. Okay. So this is the first great transformation seen in this graphical sense, where on the left side, where you have the market which serves society for millennia of years, and then with the introduction of capitalism, market began to dominate society, and society was subordinated to market. So the three levels of market, as Polanyi says, is first is market as an economic tool and institution, where each is a mechanism for organizing the distribution of an exchange of goods and services, which we all know. And what he's saying is that, for thousands of years, market has existed. And it existed not in particularly this capitalist form. It existed in other forms, the pre-capitalist market, reciprocal, distributive, barter markets. But what was the underlying premise of this is that market was always embedded in society, subordinated to social norms, and served society. It was not the master. It was its servant. But with the great transformation, that relationship became overturned. And what exactly then? You started to move from market as an economic and social tool to become a market economy where in Marxian term, there is basically the commoditization or the marketization of all of economy, where natural elements now becomes commoditized and marketized. And what are the natural elements? Essentially humans, men or women, right? Now man becomes labor, a digit to be bought and sold in the market, and the price to be determined by demand and supply and who has got power. And trees, which are natural elements of life, become timber. You cut down trees, as we know, the white man went into California and within 20, 30 years, practically destroyed the whole rainforest and beautiful, whereas the Indians had it for centuries, they never did that. And land becomes real estate to be bought and sold. Instead of usufructuary right, now you have property rights. Okay? And this permeates the whole of economy, so that the market economy is essentially an economic system controlled, regulated, and directed by markets and markets alone. That is the meaning of the market economy. But now it's become even more pernicious today. We have moved from market economy to market society, where market principles now suffuse all even non-economic spheres of life, in personal relationships, in religion, in education, in health, culture, politics, and all that. For those Christians, we talk about the prosperity gospel. And of course, we know that the health system has been completely marketized. Okay? And the prison system, is a system where when it becomes marketized, the reason or raison that for the prison system to exist is to have more prisoners rather than to rehabilitate them, right? So this is the most pernicious form of market principles extending to all of our life, and that we have to oppose. So Polanyi stated, as I said 70 years ago, that human beings would perish from the effects of social exposure. They would die as the victims of acute social dislocation through vice, perversion, crime, and starvation. Nature would be reduced to its elements. Neighborhoods and landscape defiled, rivers polluted, and we may add air and water. Air we cannot breathe, and water we cannot drink. And finally, the market administration of purchasing power would periodically liquidate business enterprises, as we know in depressions and in financial crisis. So I try to apply Polanyi's framework to understand this multiple crises of environment, health, finance, economics, and politics. Okay? And I very quickly run through this. I'm sure everybody knows that you can see on the left chart is the CO2 emission. For 800,000 years, the CO2 or emission was below, 5 minutes. I thought 5 minutes, okay. Okay. The environmental crisis, basically for thousands of years, the global mean annual was below 300 ppm. Industrial revolution and large-scale use of coal and fossil fuels disrupted this balance, and production for profit rather than production for need led to endless growth and consumption, and which is where we are landing today. And the 100 largest companies in the world account for 70% of the global emission. Okay, now we go to the health crisis. We have all kinds of epidemics. I don't have time to go through, but basically from Spanish flu to Asian flu, blah, blah, blah. And now we are in the coronavirus crisis. The point we are trying to make here is that this crisis, health crisis is not random, and pandemic is not random events. They are result of human activities, particularly in the large-scale change of land use and industrial farming, which have impact on the ecology and health. Because the home is a forest to 1.7 million types of viruses. And when you destroy the forest, you reduce the space between humans and animals, and that leads to zoonosis. Okay? And 1/3 of emerging diseases are due to changes in land use. Okay? And the important book by Wallace basically makes the point that industrial farming, that is large-scale production of livestock, right, introduce what we call genetically modified types of chicken and pigs and all this stuff, and they are packed in densely populated areas, increases the chance, virility, and transmission of the flu epidemic, as we have seen in swine flu, avian flu, and Nipah virus. So We talked about the environmental and health crisis. And then the great second transformation is the change of the relationship between finance and economy, which we have talked about, where finance, instead of becoming, of being the servant of the economy, becomes the master of the economy, right? And I don't have to go through, I think you all know what financialization is. And 4 decades of financialization set the stage for the global financial crisis. And this chart shows very clearly, the blue columns are the frequency and intensity of financial crisis. And shows that, you know, when it was unregulated and left to market forces, as prior to 1930s, there were lots of financial crises. And when they were strictly regulated, there was basically no financial crisis, and then it started again, right? And the whole point, especially post 2008, is the central banks, which are supposed to guarantee or at least build financial stability, actually in its policies have stoked further inequality and financial crisis. And what we are seeing is, no, they are setting the stage for the second, the bigger financial crisis, which is yet to come, right? And here we see the global debt that has risen from 150 trillion, doubling after the great financial crisis to 300 trillion. So where do we go from here? You know, that as I said, the great transformation, the third one, should be the overturning of this triangle where you have profit, instead of reigning, it should be at the bottom, and you have people and what you call planet on top, right? And the agents and actors in this whole process should not simply be the state and the market, but also the people, civil society, right? And we need to break up the capture of the state, because I think this is a big problem. We talk about democracy as being one person, one vote. And we feel that, oh, great, we have one person, one vote, and we have democracy. But what we have actually is, some people call it plutocracy, but put in very simple terms, is $1, one vote. The guy who has got dollar has got thousands of votes, and you got one vote, it doesn't mean anything, because you put your politicians in the Congress or in Parliament, but when they sit there, they are bought up, either the lobbying and all the stuff, and they make all the policies that are against the people. So we don't have democracy. What we have is $1, one vote, and we have to dismantle that system. Okay? And what is the alternative narratives? And narratives are very important, because narratives is what actually captures the imagination of people and make people do what they do. And they are supported by legal structures and supported by academics who spin all kinds of theory to support it, like stakeholders capitalism. So we should move the narrative from a market economy to the new narrative for alternative social economy, from maximizing growth to sustainable growth, or I like actually even the word degrowth. And I think that puts a challenge to us, because here we are all economists and we are stuck on this growth and growth and growth. But the question is, can we continue to grow like that, or should we stop growing? I think the presentation by Rohit this morning hit the nail on the head, when he talks about what we have to do. Then we should, instead of maximizing return on capital, we should accept a socially acceptable rate of return on capital. You can't have projects which are negative returns of capital because they destroy. Okay, so but at least we should have socially return rate of capital instead of large profit-oriented banks in this financialized world. We should encourage social banks, community banks, and development banks. And instead of top-down planning, we should have bottom-up planning. And I end the last slide, that the federal, and this is from the Federal Bank, Reserve Bank of Dallas, not exactly radical. It says, after the financial crisis of 2008, it says, for a prosperous future, the nation must find lasting financial stability, but where? Not in the big financial banks, but he says, in the community banks, which demonstrated stability during the crisis and its aftermath, imparting virtues to the financial system will require the end of financial institutions that are too big to fail. Thank you.